You know, saving the salmon has been a controversial Northwest debate for decades. The number of fish that return every year to spawn in Idaho's waters has dropped to, well, pretty much depletion levels. What used to be millions is now only thousands. Back in early 2021, Idaho Congressman Mike Simpson unveiled a plan to save the salmon, a $33.5 billion idea, which includes breaching 4 dams on the lower Snake River. About the same time, the Nez Perce tribe, or the Nimiipuu, began working on a salmon-saving scheme of their own. A documentary that would show how much the fish means to their people and how much of what they've done so far to restore the population, well, really hasn't done much. The 60-minute doc was released last fall and made its Boise debut last night to a sellout crowd. And after the viewing of the film, Shannon Wheeler, the chairman of the Nez Perce tribe, well, he took questions from the audience about the film and about this drastic idea to keep salmon from going extinct. Well, maybe a drastic idea, but it's certainly not a new one. The involvement of the Nimiipuu isn't new either. They've relied on fishing the Northwest rivers for thousands of years, and it's something guaranteed by the federal government, by the way, thanks to the treaty with the tribe in 1855. But that access, that has dwindled significantly, thanks to continued loss of land and the abuse of it. Then when the dams came in the 1950s, the 60s, and the 70s, well, that began a decades-long drastic decline of the actual fish to be found. And they've spent millions of dollars on smaller ideas that haven't worked, we're told. Well, the Covenant of the Salmon people asks, why not try a big one? It goes back to the beginning. Both the documentary and the connection between the Nimiipuu and the fish that sustain them.
The salmon was the first to stand up and give himself to the people for nourishment and for survival of the new people that were coming. When he stepped forward to give himself, he obligated himself to us.
And in turn, the Nimiipuu obligated themselves to the salmon. It's been that way for more than 16,000 years.
The film is called The Covenant of the Salmon People because it is a covenant with nature, with the land itself.
Here we are trying to hang on to our sacred ways.
But these days,
and our foods are diminishing.
Tribal leaders feel humans are not holding up their end of that bargain.
And in this case, the Industrial Revolution and the creation of the Columbia River System of Operations that really has decimated the salmon runs coming in, the wild salmon runs back into these waters and Nez Perce waters that we share with the United States and Idaho.
When you say decimated, give me, what does that mean?
Well, historically, 16 million salmon came into the mouth of the Columbia River, and over 2 million came into the Snake River, and now we're lucky to get 40,000, 50,000 fish.
So the biggest reason is the dams.
That's what our science says.
There are fewer than 50 fish on the spawning grounds in the best habitat in the United States for these fish.
The purpose of the Covenant of the Salmon people.
There's about 3,500, 4,000 tribal members, and we caught maybe 1,000 fish. So, quarter of a fish per person, if you look at it that way.
Is to highlight that obligation and mark this point in time as one of no return.
The fish really have maybe a couple generations before we start losing species, before we start losing one tributary at a time.
Their generations or yours?
Their generations, 8 to 10 years.
Speaking for the tribe, Shannon Wheeler believes it's about time to breach the dams on the Columbia and Snake Rivers.
The dams really are the largest cause of man-made mortality. 50% of the fish die.
Since we finally have the means and the technology.
And if we can build a better, stronger, smarter Pacific Northwest, then that's what we should do.
Because if nothing is done,
now we're only left with just a handful of places that have the numbers of salmon that we can still actually fish and continue that way of life.
It won't just be a native way of life.
And so when a species like salmon are to go away, that's the beginning of the death of our people.
That will be lost.
Now more than ever, our voice needs to be amplified for salmon and for the rest of the environment.
So we tell our story and our obligation to the salmon. And we just want people to understand that, you know, we're working every day to save the salmon.
Shanna says saving the salmon is also an obligation of the United States of America, thanks to that treaty from 1855, Article 3 of that treaty. The documentary, Covenant of the Salmon People, will be shown tonight at the Sun Valley Opera House if you missed it last night. It'll then be in Sandpoint next Wednesday. It will be back in Boise, scheduled to be back in Boise at Boise State University on September 14th.